Captain America Brave New World is the newest installment in the MCU and the fourth entry in this Captain America series of movies. First of the Marvel movies to feature Anthony Mackie as Captain America and also Harrison Ford as Thunderbolt Ross, replacing William Hurt after he passed away in 2022. Essentially, the plot of this movie, without giving away any spoilers, is Sam Wilson has officially taken on the mantle of Captain America after the events from Falcon and the Winter Soldier. He's pretty much teaming up with Thunderbolt Ross, who has been recently elected President of the United States. They're trying to work together to bring some new powerful substance into their nation and also trying to find a way to bring the Avengers back and lead them into a new future. During which a bunch of shit goes horribly wrong, which kind of puts the two of them back at odds with each other, and now each of them are trying to find a way to clean up the mess that's happening. As far as Marvel movies and Marvel projects that were coming out this year, this was not among the ones I was most excited for. I mean, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I enjoyed it as a TV show. It had its good, it had its bad. I did appreciate that the show gave proper character development for Sam Wilson as he becomes Captain America. But that being said, I wasn't like psyched out of my mind as soon as that movie was over to see him in his own standalone movie. And hearing the production trouble this movie went through, you're hearing about all the reshoots it had to go through, it didn't sound like a movie that Marvel was too high on, was too confident in. Like, it almost felt like it reached a point, it's like, alright, we need to finally get this movie out, so here, just release it, let's get it over with, and let's just see what happens. And I will say this much, I don't believe this movie is as bad as a lot of people on the internet have been saying it is, but I will say this much, it is by far and away the weakest of the Captain America movies, that's for sure. Honestly, the best way I would describe this movie for me, it's the definition of give and take. Yeah, I almost feel like with every positive I'm going to say about this movie, I'm going to have a negative that goes along with it. So, yeah, let's just see how this goes. Let me say this much to start. I like the character of Sam Wilson. I like Anthony Mackie as an actor, and I think he does a good job here in this movie. Performance-wise, I've always liked him as Sam Wilson. I've always liked his character. I've always liked him as a hero. And after Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you could say, was about him accepting his role as Captain America. I was interested in seeing how he would be as full-fledged Captain America in this movie. And that's where part of my problem with Sam Wilson comes into play here. And frankly, I don't think it necessarily has a lot to do with Anthony Mackie's performance. I think it's more so on the writers of this movie. Because you look at the development of Sam Wilson's character in the MCU, namely in the last few projects that we've gotten. I mean, in the end of Avengers Endgame, Cap gets really old, he passes the mantle of Captain America down to Sam Wilson, and Falcon and the Winter Soldier was pretty much him learning to accept that mantle and accept that responsibility and accept, alright, Steve Rogers chose me to be Captain America. I'm gonna be Captain America. What I was hoping for when you go into this movie is I wanted him to fully own the mantle. I want him to walk in this movie be like, I am Captain America. Steve Rogers was, now it's me. And the problem is, in this movie, I never felt like he completely owned that character or owned what he's meant to become. I'm not saying he should totally abandon who he was when he was Falcon or anything like that. I know he has to make Captain America his own in some way, shape, or form, but there are certain qualities of Captain America that he just doesn't quite have here. I mean, it's gonna be hard enough for people out there to accept him as Captain America, given the fact that Chris Evans was Captain America for a decade. But it's not just the fact that Chris Evans was Captain America. Chris Evans was a great Captain America because he perfectly embodied the qualities of Captain America. Charisma, leadership, patriotism. I'm not entirely sure if that's a word, but I'm gonna roll with it. For me, in this movie, I don't know if I see a lot of those qualities in Sam Wilson, and that's a little bit of a bummer. And there's even a period in this movie where he is once again questioning to himself, was I supposed to be Captain America? Am I meant for this mantle? Am I meant to wield that shield? Am I meant to be that leader? And I'm seeing that moment and I'm sitting to myself like, wait a minute, I thought you had an entire miniseries to figure out if you were meant for this or not. I thought we decided that. I thought you were done with the bitching. Like, I feel like he should be a little more confident in his role and believe that he's capable of doing what Captain America needs to do here. However, I will say one aspect of Sam Wilson's character arc that I do really like, that I also appreciated from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I do like his relationship dynamic rather, with Isaiah Bradley. When Isaiah Bradley was this former super soldier, he got fucked over by the government, and, you know, Sam Wilson kind of spent time in the show, kind of reinvigorating his faith, you know, picking him up when he really needed him to. And once again, you see that here in the dynamic between Sam and Isaiah Bradley. And that's absolutely credit I will give to Carl Lumbly's performance in this movie. I thought he was fantastic. And that's credit I have to give to Carl Lumbly, the actor in this movie, because through his performance, you really see the brokenness in Isaiah Bradley. You can hear it in his voice, you can see it in his emotion, and just how he acts. He's such a broken down individual. He's been through so much. I do think he kind of serves as that little push for Sam Wilson to be like, all right, this is who I'm fighting for. This is what I'm trying to protect. This is what I'm trying to save. Like, this is what gives him that little extra oomph he needs to remember, like, that he is Captain America and that he has a job to do now. So that was a story arc that brought some emotion to the movie that I can appreciate. As far as other story elements in this movie go, I will say this much. I do appreciate that this movie is attempting anyway to tie up a lot of loose ends that have been left from previous Marvel movies. Like, yeah, if you ever stopped and thought to yourself, like, okay, have we just forgotten about, like, this character entirely, or have we forgot about that thing entirely? Because both seemed like they would be a big deal down the road. Here, they're finally addressed, and I can appreciate that. The problem with that is, this movie feels very, very unfocused when it comes to its story. Like, there's one element that deals with something from another movie that you kind of feel like it doesn't have a huge role in this movie, or at least not as big as the movie wants you to feel like it is. You almost just feel like it's trying to set something up for future Marvel movies, and you don't even know how immediate that future is. And again, I'm trying to be as vague as I can in this review for some of you, but there's another story element that has to deal with a Marvel movie that has absolutely nothing to do with Captain America. And the character, the hero that movie centered around has absolutely nothing to do with this movie. Like, it almost feels like the story that we're being told and the movie that we're watching would have almost been better served as a sequel to that movie, not so much a sequel to Captain America. Because what kind of makes the story feel a little bit more out of place is this storyline that borrows elements from this other superhero's movie is that superhero is nowhere in this movie. So it's like, yeah, certain elements that we're seeing in this movie, certain story arcs that are being taken, the fact that a certain character has absolutely nothing to do with it just kind of feels out of place. Also, as far as characters that I really liked, but I think kind of got wasted a little bit, Giancarlo Stanton's in this movie, and he plays kind of this, like, hitman who's, you know, clearly been hired by someone. And when he's in this movie, I thought he was great. I mean, he was riveting. He played a great villain. Whenever he was on screen, I was sucked in. I was locked in. Couldn't wait to see what this guy was going to do next, what he was going to say next. I feel like the trailer, somewhat anyway, tried to market him as the villain of the story, at least one of the key villains of the story. And he's not really that. He's in the movie for a few scenes, but what he's meant to be is the enforcer for who is the main villain of this story. And the problem is, the main villain of this story, I mean, again, I can appreciate this character being in the movie because, you know, it finally answers some questions that have been on my mind for a while, and I'm sure some of yours for a while. But I just wish this character was more memorable as a villain. I feel like this character should have been, but again, possibly because of execution of story and writing, it just didn't work out. Also, yeah, Danny Ramirez as Falcon is another character I want to touch on. I really want to like his character, and I don't dislike him necessarily, but I certainly don't care about him the way the movie wants me to. Because he's taken on the mantle as Falcon since, you know, Sam Wilson's now Captain America, so he's kind of meant to be to Sam Wilson what Sam Wilson was to Steve Rogers. The problem is, I always felt like Steve and Sam had a great dynamic, had great chemistry, a really good partnership. And that's why for me, at the end of Avengers Endgame, when Steve passed the mantle to Sam and not Bucky, I know a lot of people were outraged with that. I was among the minority that was okay with that decision. The dynamic though between this Captain America and this Falcon, I just couldn't really buy into it because I think for me, Danny Ramirez in this movie, you know what it is? He is, to me, what I think a lot of people have the flaw with Tom Holland's Spider-Man is. Like, the problem I've heard from a lot of fans about Tom Holland's Spider-Man is he acts a little too much like a kid, like constantly trying to impress someone, trying to make a name for himself a little bit, like trying too hard is how some people feel towards Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Well, that's kind of how I feel towards this Falcon. Like, I think he tries a little too hard to be funny, and some of the times he's not exactly. I mean, they even run a joke that they can't get him to shut up. And trying to prove himself a little too much, kind of being a little reckless with, you know, how he acts out in his missions or how he fights or whatever it might be. Like, I couldn't get on board with his character. He annoyed me more than I was invested in him. And again, I know the movie wanted me to care about him, and I just didn't really all as much as the movie wanted me to. Yeah, get into the action in this movie. Again, some of the action in this movie is pretty fun. Some of it is enjoyable. The problem is not all of it is filmed all that well. I mean that in a sense, like, not that the action is a lot of shaky cam or anything like that. You know, the fight scenes, the flight scenes when, you know, Captain America is just soaring through the air, taking out missiles or jets or fighting whoever it might be, those are pretty cool. The problem is, there's a background with this movie from a visual standpoint that doesn't look the greatest. I mean, you heard this movie went through a bunch of reshoots, and watching this finished project, you kind of wonder if they did much, if anything, with those reshoots. I mean, there are moments that are clearly CGI. There are moments where something is very adamantly and clearly on a green screen. Like, it almost hurts your eyes how apparent it is. I mean, this is a Marvel movie that was made for a shit-tillion dollars. It's like, you didn't have the budget to clean up those visuals a little bit. So I guess the best way to describe it would be there were fun action scenes that were held back by poor visuals. Also, yeah, get into Red Hulk, because I know Red Hulk was meant to be a major selling point for this movie. One could argue it was the selling point for this movie. Gonna say this much right now. Red Hulk doesn't have as much of a role in this movie as the trailers kind of marketed him out to have a role. Like, he throws down with Captain America in like the final 10 minutes of the movie. I'll admit, the throwdown is fun. You see Red Hulk do some very Hulk things, and that's cool. But again, it wasn't as epic a showdown as the movie was marketing it to be. But to stick with Red Hulk for a minute, that is Thunderbolt Ross, I did, however, think Harrison Ford was fantastic in this movie. In fact, I would go so far to say maybe his performance was perhaps the best part of this movie, because I legitimately thought he was great. Because what I appreciate in Harrison Ford's performance as Thunderbolt Ross is I feel like he really captured what Thunderbolt Ross is supposed to be. Like, he does want to be a good guy, he does want to do the right thing, he's trying to fight for justice and America and, you know, get everything on the right path, especially now that he's the president of the United States. However, from what's gone on in movies like The Incredible Hulk and, you know, movies like Captain America Civil War, he's done a lot of damage, and he's gone off on the wrong foot with a lot of very powerful people. Therefore, it's very hard to trust him, it's very hard to believe in him. You want to, the characters want to, but he's just done a lot of damage, and you do feel like he's aware of that. He's trying to do a lot of damage control because he wants to mend relationships with different people that he's really wronged in the past. But at the same time, there's something about him that he has this vision, or he has this idea that he genuinely believes will make the country better, make the world better, and he kind of just has to stick by it, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to get to that point, regardless of who he hurts. So yeah, there's a lot of back and forth in this movie to how you're maybe supposed to feel about Thunderbolt Ross, but I could appreciate that, because for me, I feel like that's kind of the embodiment of Thunderbolt Ross. Like, we know he's a good guy, we know he's on the side of good, but he's not always handling it in the way that the heroes of the movie should be handling it. So I do appreciate seeing that in Harrison Ford's performance, 100%. So all in all, Captain America Brave New World, it has its good, and it absolutely has its bad. I like Anthony Mackie as an actor. I like Anthony Mackie's performance as Sam Wilson. I do wish the story had Sam Wilson completely owning the mantle as Captain America. I wanted to walk out of this movie and say, yep, it's Anthony Mackie's role now. He's Captain America. I just wasn't able to, and that's a bit of a bummer, because I know Captain America is going to have a huge role going forward in the MCU. There were characters and performances in this movie that I really enjoyed. Isaiah Bradley, Thunderbolt Ross. There were characters and performances in this movie that I think were either held back or I didn't know too much about, like Falcon or Giancarlo Stanton's character. I can't remember who that was. Oh yeah, I completely forgot. There's a Black Widow-ish kind of character in this movie. Does she do much of anything? Nope. Has some fun action that definitely gets bogged down by poor visual effects. I can appreciate the movie tying up loose ends from previous Marvel movies, especially ones that maybe feel a little bit more forgotten. I do wish it was tied together in a much more focused story. In the end, while it's definitely not the weakest MCU movie we've gotten post-Endgame, it's certainly not the kind that's gonna reinvigorate hope into fans of this franchise. So with that, I'm gonna give this one a 5 out of 10, which makes, I'd say, about half a movie in here worth watching.
How much you want?
Half.
half.
So that's all I gotta say, guys. Thank you so much for watching my video, and as always, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and I will see you all next time.